In this episode of things I talk about, Bitcoin and Litecoin are about to see a massive boom, leading the crypto sphere to a crazy future. And what I mean by that is something I've been talking with you guys about for a long time. And we're seeing it happen, and we saw it already having significant impact as of last month. In fact, if you remember, I've been telling you for more than a year now, and definitely since the Litecoin and Bitcoin conferences in 2024, in July of 24, I told you, look out for Litecoin. You're going to see a lot of whales, a lot of accumulation by whales, financial institutions, big companies, etc. Not just of BTC, but also of LTC. And that is exactly what we're seeing since the past year. We're seeing an increasing number of people purchasing LTC that previously had not. And even though it still remains mostly in the hands of retail traders, which is incredible, and that is a big flag for you if you are not paying attention. The fact is, increasingly, we are seeing bigger and bigger buyers purchase significant quantities of Litecoin. Remember, there are only 4 times as many Litecoin as there are Bitcoin in terms of the max cap supply. And so that means 21 million Bitcoins means there can only ever be 84 million Litecoins. And the price right now is not 1/4 of a Bitcoin. Right? One Litecoin, which has all the same technical characteristics as Bitcoin and has a very nice, wide, decentralized network of computers. Sure, it's smaller than Bitcoin's, but it's very well decentralized. And pretty much all of the top miners of Bitcoin also mine Litecoin, as do many smaller miners. So it's very well decentralized. And again, the price is not anywhere near 1/4, right, of a Bitcoin for a Litecoin. Even though on paper, you'd think it might be, right, or would be close to it. Because again, it has all the same characteristics. It's often called, the silver to Bitcoin gold, right? But the price is around 1,000 Litecoin per Bitcoin, which is crazy if you want to talk about an undervalued asset, right? It's insanely undervalued, in my opinion. Sure, maybe it goes to zero, whatever, but it's been around for a very long time and has not shown any sign of going to zero, despite the ups and downs that it's had. Litecoin has continued to survive and thrive, and we are seeing more and more big buyers buy it. And just like with Bitcoin, when the supply is reduced to practically nothing, with the available circulating supply, and the demand remains high, guess what happens to the price? Look at this amazingly cute dog. Look at this amazingly cute dog. And I told you guys, look out for the significant impact already starting in July on BTC and Litecoin. And I told you, I've been telling you this for the past year and more. So we are getting to the stage now where you're going to see the law of supply and demand having an impact, a significant impact, and it's going to begin happening. And don't be surprised if it starts happening sometime in July. What has happened since July? Well, we saw Bitcoin go to all-time highs, and not like a little bit, right? It went up pretty significantly, right? 4, 5, 6%, 7%, 10%. Went up to $123,000. I think it reached almost $124,000. The point is 123 was in the bag. And just yesterday it was back at 122 and change before coming back down. So 118 or whatever. And Litecoin also did not go to all-time highs, but went up to 122 bucks, 125 bucks, I think it was yesterday. It's also had some very nice movement down from around 70 or 70 something dollars just a couple months ago, right? Around the end of June. So it's gone up dramatically in a very short while. And again, remains at around a ratio of, plus or minus 1,000 Litecoins per Bitcoin. But we are seeing that ratio, get shaved away hair by hair, centimeter by centimeter, inch by inch over time. Now, will it ever be that a quarter of Bitcoin's price will equal one Litecoin? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe it will. Right? But for now, in my opinion, the value of Litecoin is massively underrated. And it really has, sure, it can go to zero, but if you can get something that is technically, on a technical level, the same thing as Bitcoin in terms of the protocol, except for there's just 4 times as much of it, right? And it therefore produces 4 times as many per block that is mined. But other than that, it's the same thing. Has all the same functionality that Bitcoin has, right? And gets it first, right? Gets it before Bitcoin does, typically. Certainly when there's major changes to Bitcoin, they're tested on Litecoin first. So it actually remains a very solid testnet in that sense, which was the original purpose of it, right? And why it was created by Monsieur Lee. So at the moment, we're looking at a market where BTC and Litecoin have had a dramatic dwindling in their available supply, in the circulating supply. And we are seeing the impact of that on price. It's not even a question. We are seeing the price shock happen. There is a supply shock, and when there is a supply shock, you usually get a price shock. And that is exactly what is happening. So no one should be surprised by this. This is the natural occurrence of events according to the most basic law of supply and demand. If you know anything about even the most basic economics, you'll understand when there is a high demand and a low supply, the price goes up. That's the tendency anyway, right? And the opposite is true. If there is a high supply and a low demand, the price generally goes down. But in this case, we have the most basic thing that anyone can understand. High demand, low supply, price go up, right? Now, I know that there are some people that think that is counterintuitive because they think, well, no, if the demand is high and the supply is low, then price should come down. Well, no, that's not how it works. That's not how economics works. Let's say I have 10 apples and I'm charging $1 per apple, and then I sell 5 of them and I made $5. Now I only have 5 apples left. And all of a sudden 30 people show up at my booth because they need apples for some reason, but I only have 5 apples left. I'm not going to just sell them for $1 a piece if everyone is clamoring for those apples. Maybe I'll charge $1.50. Maybe I'll charge $2. Maybe I'll charge $3. Who knows? I will charge whatever the market will bear. Within reason, obviously. I'm not going to extort the buyers, gouge them at prices that are unreasonable. but many companies will, and many products will. But in the case of Bitcoin and Litecoin, the market determines the prices. There is no middleman. Yeah, you can say that the exchange is the middleman, whatever, but even on the exchange charges a minimal fee to enable the exchange. So they don't really set the price. It's the buyers and sellers that set the price. Now, you can tell me, well, the exchanges do a lot of the buying and selling. Yes, they do. But that means that there's still just one side of the trade. There still needs to be somebody on the other side of the trade to buy or sell, to agree on that price. So, in its purest form, especially when you're trading on decentralized exchanges or just making pure peer-to-peer direct, buys and sells, swaps, trades, whatever you want to call it, the marketplace literally determines the price of Bitcoin and Litecoin, which are true decentralized currencies. You can say also, by the way, Cardano is a true decentralized cryptocurrency, and of course there are others. But I'm talking specifically here about Bitcoin and Litecoin because they are two of the most, because Bitcoin is by far the most decentralized and most significant cryptocurrency at the moment, and has been pretty much since its inception, and continues to be, despite all the rivals who have attempted to overthrow it. It remains the king. And Litecoin is this little redheaded stepchild, so to speak, or a little brother, or whatever you want to call it. And for the time being remains such. And it's the one that's, often overlooked, usually overlooked. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a significant potential to increase significantly, right, in its perceived value, just like its bigger brother. And why? Well, because, again, it works fluidly, seamlessly, very well with Bitcoin. In other words, you can conduct transactions and swap very easily from Bitcoin to Litecoin. And the exchange fees are very, very low. And they run pretty much the same protocol, right? That's why the transactions are very fluid, swapping from one to another. That's why the fees are very low, swapping from one to another. And all of the functionality that Bitcoin has, again, Litecoin has. So whatever you wanted to do with your Bitcoin, you can pretty much do with your Litecoin in its version of it, right? So if you have ordinals on Bitcoin, you can also have ordinals on Litecoin. There'll be different ordinals, meaning if I put up the same picture and make it a Bitcoin ordinal, and then I want to have it on Litecoin, well, I have to inscribe it on the Litecoin blockchain. So it would be technically a different asset, right? But it could be the same picture, right? It could have all the same properties. It would just be a different asset on a different blockchain. And so on and so forth, right? If I want to send information and store it and make it archivable and retrievable on Bitcoin, I can do the same exact thing on Litecoin. So I hope that makes sense to you, because it is pretty much as plain as day, even though it's night here. It's a very clear and effective kind of clone of Bitcoin that effectively does the same thing as Bitcoin and is just extremely cheap compared to Bitcoin at the moment. What if I told you you could buy Bitcoin at $400, $480 right now, less than $500? How many would you buy? How much would you buy this? Would you buy at least one? Considering it's $100,000 something now. Well, again, there's only 4 times as many Litecoins as there are Bitcoins. So that means that maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even 5 years from now, but maybe 10 years or 20 years from now, All right, maybe when your children or your children's children reach the age where it matters, the Bitcoin or the Litecoin that you buy now will be worth roughly a quarter of whatever Bitcoin will be worth at that time. And who knows, maybe that'll be worth, millions of dollars or more. Certainly a Bitcoin is, likely to go to millions of dollars, which every analyst from here to Timbuktu seems to think it's going to. And I'm not here to prognosticate that to you, but I'm just telling you the value of Bitcoin is likely to continue rising. And I don't just mean the monetary value, because to me, Bitcoin has always been, the real value of it has always been the ability to transfer values between parties in an unfettered manner. Okay. It is a direct peer-to-peer transaction without a middleman. And yes, I know it can have a monetary value, and for most people, that's how they view it. For me, the most important thing about Bitcoin was always, from the very beginning, and remains today, the ability to transfer values, not just money. And values are not always money. Values can be lessons in life. Values can be art. Values can be objectified, tokenized real world assets, right? Like real estate, other material goods that may or may not be transferred for monetary reasons. For example, if I give someone a car, I might not sell it to them. I might just give it to them as a gift without charging them a single Satoshi. But I can still have a record of that transaction on the blockchain that shows that I did that for whatever reasons, right? If I give someone a house, same thing, right? Or if I sell it to them, maybe I sell it to them for $1, a symbolic, just so that they feel like they bought something, right? Well, I can transfer the value of the house to them in a contract that I store on the Bitcoin blockchain or on the Litecoin blockchain. They both have that same functionality. And again, you have a dwindling supply of Bitcoin at an extremely rapid rate. And I don't care if you tell me, oh, there's still 2 million, maybe there's 3 million Bitcoins that are potentially available for trading. There's like 2 million that we know of on exchanges, and maybe there's another million that are not on exchanges but could easily be the moment that people holding them see, oh, price is going up to 200 grand or whatever, and there's no more supply left. Maybe. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, not all of the Bitcoins on exchanges are available for trading. We know that many of them, in fact, most of them, are sitting in long-term accounts that simply don't touch them. They just buy them and leave them on the accounts. So they create an account on Coinbase or Binance or wherever, Kraken, Gemini, any of these big exchanges or small exchanges, and they just buy them and leave them there. And they trust that the exchange will continue to hold them for them in safety, safely in perpetuity. It's probably a mistake, but that's what they do, because they don't listen to people like me and other people telling them, not your keys, not your crypto. So they just leave them entrusted in someone else's hands. And then when that exchange gets hacked and their funds get drained, they complain, oh, well, my funds all got hacked. Well, no, you didn't take the most basic safety precautions to secure your own assets in your own hardware wallet or paper wallet or brain wallet or whatever. So it's usually the user's mistake. Usually, right? Bitcoin has not been hacked. The Bitcoin blockchain has not been hacked. Exchanges get hacked. That means it's like a bank gets broken into. Banks do get broken into sometimes. Most of them hold nothing these days. Most of their valuables, if anything, are in the vaults that they hold, if they hold any at all. And most banks don't even hold those anymore. All right? If you go into most commercial banks these days, retail banks anyway, you'll notice very few of them actually have vaults anymore, right? Like where you could have like a safety deposit box and keep your, prized possessions there. Most of them don't have any such vaults anymore where you could keep stuff in a vault. Why? Because of the costs of managing those vaults. It's not worth it to the bank in most cases because they realize that having such a thing makes them a target. When they know that the robbers know, the banks have usually very little cash. Right? So if a robber wants to get however many thousands of dollars and they go to a bank and they ask for the cash, very often the bank doesn't have more than a few grand, which may not be worth the risk for the people putting on the ski masks, right? And so the robbers these days usually want to target places that actually have vaults. Of course, those places have additional security because of the vaults. But that doesn't mean they don't get targeted. They absolutely do. But likewise, with an exchange of cryptocurrencies, right, the ones with the most security are the ones that have the most crypto, and the ones that have additional features and layers of security, etc. Well, those are the ones that get targeted. Have many of them resisted hacking attempts? Yes, they have. But a huge percentage of them have been hacked. A huge percentage, including of the big ones. Right? Now we know that in some cases, this has actually effectively completely destroyed the exchanges and caused them to lose everything and effectively be liquidated. FTX, a notable one, obviously, but that wasn't because of a hack, that was because they mismanaged funds. But we know that even places like Binance and Bybit have been hacked over the years, right? And those are not insignificant exchanges in the crypto space. So the point is keep your funds safe. Unless you're actively trading some small amount of your portfolio on an exchange, you should do yourself a favor and keep the vast majority of your holdings off of the exchange if you can. And you should be able to, especially if you have a portfolio. Right? If you have any amount worth investing, you should buy a cold wallet, right? A hardware wallet, or have some other form of secure offline method of protecting your funds. Because you don't want to be the victim of the next hack attack of an exchange, which is usually done by socially engineering something and finding a backdoor in. That's usually something as simple as getting access from an employee to some files that then sees, oh, I can just use this to get inside and, steal some funds from some employees or, some clients or whatever. And we've seen that happen many times. Anyway, I didn't come here to talk to you about hacking and safety, but it did lead to that because it's a real thing. The point of this video is to remind you that we are seeing a significant supply shock happening on Litecoin and Bitcoin that is absolutely going to drive the market wild. And as we see the supply shock continue in September, October, November of this year, very likely, the likelihood is that if that happens, you will continue to see increase in demand and decrease in supply. Now, while I'm not going to tell you about the intraday aspects of that in this video, if you want, you can watch my other videos where I talk about that, or join my trading group. Join the trading group I co-founded where we talk about that. Then sure, you can come and learn about how to do that. Trading volatility intraday, right? But broadly, from an investment point of view, in the long term, if you look at the big picture of where this is obviously going, right, it is eminently clear that Bitcoin and Litecoin are, and other alts, but Bitcoin and Litecoin specifically, are in high demand and have low supply. And that is going to lead inevitably to a significant increase in price over time. Probably in the relatively short term, within months, maybe several years. But my guesstimate would be within months, personal opinion. And it doesn't for several years. So don't let anybody convince you that you didn't know when you saw this video, because you've seen this video and I'm telling you that is the likely trajectory, in my opinion. And now you know it. Peace.